Every 4 years, you step into a voting booth, pull a lever, and believe you have just decided the future of the United States. But what if the real decisions were already made long before you cast your ballot? What if the true power in America does not sit in the Oval Office, but in corporate boardrooms you will never enter? Today, we are exposing the heavily guarded, perfectly legal system that actually dictates how America runs. Once you see the invisible strings, you can never unsee them. Let's follow the money. For generations, the American public has been taught a very simple version of how the American political system works. You vote for a representative. That representative goes to Washington, and they write laws that reflect the will of the people. But behind the majestic white marble of Capitol Hill, a very different reality operates in plain sight. In 2014, a groundbreaking study by researchers at Princeton and Northwestern universities set out to answer a highly controversial question: who really controls America? They analyzed over 2 decades of data, looking at thousands of policy decisions. The conclusion was mathematically terrifying. The study found that the preferences of the average American have a near-zero, statistically non-significant impact upon public policy. Let that sink in. Whether the majority of average citizens support or oppose a proposed law makes almost no difference in whether it actually passes. However, when economic elites and corporate interest groups want a law passed, it is highly likely to become reality. America, according to the data, operates less like a pure democracy and more like an oligarchy. But this transition did not happen overnight. It was meticulously engineered. To understand how Washington, D.C. insiders captured the system, we have to look back to a pivotal moment in 1971. At the time, consumer rights movements and environmental regulations were gaining massive traction in the United States. Corporate profits were feeling the squeeze. A prominent corporate lawyer named Lewis Powell, who would later become a Supreme Court justice, wrote a highly confidential memo to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The Powell Memorandum was essentially a call to arms for American corporations. It argued that businesses needed to organize, hire lobbyists, fund think tanks, and heavily influence the political narrative if they wanted to survive. Corporate America listened. In the 1970s, the lobbying industry exploded. K Street, a prominent road in Washington, D.C., transformed into the epicenter of corporate lobbying. Suddenly, massive corporations were not just selling products. They were actively drafting the laws that governed them. Today, there are thousands of registered lobbyists in Washington, often outnumbering the actual members of Congress by more than 20 to 1. These are the invisible architects of the U.S. economy. They do not just influence legislation. In many cases, they literally write the bills. It is a common, verified practice for a corporate lobbyist to hand a fully drafted piece of legislation to a member of Congress, who then introduces it as their own. The system is designed to bypass the voter completely. While lobbying built the foundation of corporate influence, the true floodgates of political control were opened in January of 2010. In a landmark, highly controversial ruling known as Citizens United, the Supreme Court declared that corporations and unions have the same free speech rights as individuals. And in the eyes of the court, spending money is a form of free speech. This single decision fundamentally altered the reality of the U.S. economy and the American political landscape. It gave birth to super PACs, or political action committees, which can raise and spend unlimited amounts of money to influence elections. But the most suspenseful and dangerous element of this ruling was the explosion of dark money in politics. Under current laws, certain nonprofit organizations can spend hundreds of millions of dollars on political campaigns without ever disclosing who their wealthy donors are. During the 2020 U.S. election cycle, a staggering total of over $14 billion was spent, making it the most expensive election in history. Billions of those dollars came from untraceable dark money groups and a tiny fraction of ultra-wealthy mega-donors. When a billionaire or a massive corporation legally funnels $10 million into a politician's campaign, it is not a donation. It is an investment. And the return on that investment comes in the form of tax loopholes, deregulation, and favorable government contracts. The politician knows exactly who funded their victory, and more importantly, they know who can fund their opponent in the next cycle if they do not comply. Nowhere is this invisible control more evident than in the relationship between the U.S. government and the financial elite. If you want to know who really controls America, you have to look at Wall Street. There is a phenomenon in Washington known as the revolving door. It is the seamless movement of high-level personnel from the federal agencies that regulate industries directly into the massive corporations they were just regulating, and vice versa. Consider the devastating 2008 financial crisis. Reckless gambling by major banks crashed the global economy, erasing trillions of dollars in household wealth and costing millions of Americans their homes and jobs. Yet, not a single high-level Wall Street executive went to prison. Instead, the government orchestrated a massive, multi-billion-dollar bailout funded by the taxpayer. How does this happen? The answer lies in the revolving door. The government officials tasked with regulating the banks and managing the bailout were, in many cases, former executives of those exact same banks. And when their time in government ended, many returned to Wall Street for incredibly lucrative positions. When the regulators and the regulated are the exact same group of people attending the same dinners and sharing the same financial interests, the regulatory system becomes a shield for the wealthy rather than a sword for the public. This engineered ecosystem is a primary driver of the massive wealth inequality in America today, where the top 1% holds more wealth than the entire middle class combined. But the control extends far beyond the stock market. In his farewell address in 1961, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, a five-star general who led the Allied forces in World War II, issued a chilling warning to the American public. He warned of the disastrous rise of misplaced power heavily concentrated in the military-industrial complex. More than 6 decades later, his nightmare is a verified reality. The United States spends more on its military than the next 10 countries combined, with an annual defense budget approaching $1 trillion. But where does that money actually go? A massive percentage flows directly into the hands of a few private defense contractors. These corporations wield unimaginable political power. They strategically build their manufacturing plants across dozens of different states. Why? Because if a politician tries to vote against a massive weapons contract, the defense contractor can threaten to shut down the plant in that politician's district, causing thousands of local job losses. It is political hostage-taking, and it guarantees that military spending never decreases, regardless of whether the nation is at war or at peace. The defense lobby heavily funds the political campaigns of the exact same congressional committee members who approve their multi-billion-dollar contracts. It is a self-sustaining loop of endless profit, paid for by the American taxpayer, dictating U.S. foreign policy from the shadows. To maintain this level of control over the U.S. economy and political system, the ultimate architects must also control the narrative. You cannot maintain massive wealth inequality and systemic corruption if the public is fully aware and unified against it. Therefore, controlling what the American public sees, hears, and believes is paramount. In 1983, 50 different independent corporations controlled the vast majority of American media, including television, radio, and print. Today, through decades of aggressive deregulation and massive corporate buyouts, that number has shrunk to just a handful of massive conglomerates. 6 powerful corporations control almost everything you watch on the evening news, read in major publications, or hear on the radio. When a few incredibly wealthy boards of directors dictate the boundaries of acceptable political debate, certain truths are naturally filtered out. You will rarely see major television networks conducting deep, systemic investigations into the corporate lobbying that funds their own massive advertising networks. Instead, the public is constantly fed a diet of hyper-partisan outrage. By keeping the American public fiercely divided over cultural issues, the real power players ensure that the population remains distracted. A divided country fighting itself will never unite to challenge the corporate monopolies and Washington, D.C. insiders who are quietly emptying the vault. As we move deeper into the 21st century, a new, even more powerful force has entered the arena of special interest groups. The tech giants of Silicon Valley have quietly surpassed Wall Street and defense contractors as the biggest spenders in Washington. Companies that control search engines, social media feeds, and global digital commerce now hold a terrifying level of influence. They do not just lobby for tax breaks, they are lobbying to protect their ultimate asset, which is your data. Big tech corporations possess an intimate, psychological profile of almost every American citizen. They know what you buy, what you fear, and how you vote. Through highly advanced algorithms, they have the unprecedented ability to amplify certain political messages while silently burying others. When government regulators attempt to crack down on these tech monopolies, the tech giants unleash an army of lobbyists. They fund massive political campaigns, sponsor the think tanks that advise politicians, and ensure that any new regulations are either entirely toothless or actively beneficial to their monopolies. The invisible hand of big tech now guides the digital reality of the American public, effectively controlling the flow of human information. So, who really controls America? It is not a secret, shadowy cabal meeting in a dark, smoke-filled room. It is much more terrifying because it is entirely institutionalized, perfectly legal, and operating in broad daylight. America is controlled by a beautifully complex, highly organized machine of capital. It is controlled by the defense contractors who ensure perpetual spending, the Wall Street executives who write their own financial regulations, the tech monopolies that harvest human behavior, and the massive dark money networks that buy political compliance. The politicians you see arguing on television are often just the public relations department for these underlying corporate structures. The true power in America is economic. It flows through the corridors of K Street, into the campaign funds of eager politicians, and out through the legislation that dictates your daily life. The system is not broken. It is functioning exactly as it was designed to. But the greatest vulnerability of this massive machine is the illusion it relies upon. It requires your blind participation. It requires you to believe that your single vote is the only power you possess, while billions of dollars speak volumes over your head. But history shows that when the public truly wakes up to the mechanisms of their own subjugation, no amount of dark money can stop the tide. The question is no longer who controls the country. The question is, now that you know exactly how the game is rigged, what will you do about it?